Hi, my name is Hunter, and this is the Awana, Tennessee Network. Today I've got Joel Easling joining me. He's the Awana Missionary in Southwest Washington, and he's been the missionary there for about a year. But don't let the time frame fool you, because Joel has been involved in Awana pretty much since he was born. He's grown up in it, served in it, and now he's a missionary helping churches thrive in their Awana ministries. And I'm very excited to have Joel on today. He's going to be covering a very important topic for us, which is retention. How do we keep volunteers? How do we retain them and keep the vision alive in our ministries? And I'm especially excited to have Joel on today for a couple of reasons. One, he's part of my work group with the missionaries. And two, he just had a new addition to his family. And the story behind that is pretty awesome. I can't wait for him to share it. So without further ado, here is Mr. Joel Easling and the conversation that I had with him. Joel, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, I'm super stoked to be here. Loving the chance to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're here, man. I didn't think we were going to be able to do this. For those of you who don't know, Joel recently expanded his family. So I would love for you, just before we start our conversation, kind of share that journey, because, you know, we're in the same work group. So I've been with you along the journey of you waiting on Haley and all that. And so could you share about the weight of it, and then just the joy she's been since you've had her?
Yeah, it's wild. We just back on the 4th. So we had our 4th baby. Her name's Hallie Ray, sorry. But she was a week and a half late officially. So it was definitely new waters for us, because all of our other kiddos had been early. So even coming up on the due date, you know, we're going, all right, this is interesting. You know, what does that look like? And definitely different, but super excited to have her with us now in our arms and everything. She came out big. She was 10'7", big kiddo, but definitely just a joy to have, and her older siblings just love having her around. I mean, they can't get enough of her. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So it's fun.
Yeah, so having Hallie, and man, because I remember you were like, still not here, still not here. And then I wasn't sure if we were going to record. So it's great you could come on and record. And man, that is a big baby. My son was 9.5 pounds, and we thought he was big. But man,
Yep.
over 10 pounds. That's like,
Yeah, I know. She's just, 22 inches. So it's not even that she's just a chunker. She's just big. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, she looks like a toddler already. So it's
that is
wild.
so crazy. So
Yeah.
man, I know you're excited, and that's great that your rest of your family's getting to experience that. How old are your other kids?
Yeah. Well, so Mila is 4, and Charlie is 2 now. Our second born was actually, she only survived 8 hours out of the womb. But God's been so good to us in the whole process through that and everything. And so we have 3 with us, and we're just so grateful to have them, and the opportunity to have had Janie for the short time that we did as well. So
Wow.
we're just blessed to be on a really any comprehension. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, and what's great too with you having all those kids, Awana, it's not just your job, it's not just the ministry you're part of. That affects your whole family. I mean, Awana is made for your kids, and so it's a journey your whole family gets to be a part of and grow from. So that's awesome, man. And
Oh yeah.
I'm just so glad to have you on, because I know you've got a lot to bring to the table. Like I was telling people, you grew up in Awana. Basically, you were telling me pretty much since before birth you were around it
Yep.
in some way. So you've seen the ins and outs, you've seen the changes, but you overall know the heartbeat of Awana is to disciple. And the reason I wanted to have you on is you understand that Awana's discipleship philosophy isn't just about how do we disciple kids, but discipleship also goes back on the leader. How do we disciple our leaders? Because the disciple being made in our leaders is the disciple being made in our kids. You know,
Absolutely.
it's full circle. So when we're talking about leaders, you know, I had David come on a few weeks back to talk about bringing on leaders, recruiting leaders. But I wanted to have you on to take another spin at retaining leaders, because it's one thing to recruit leaders. It's a whole nother ball game to retain leaders and keep them and to keep that vision going. And so, one thing I wanted to ask you was, why do you think it's hard to retain leaders or to keep the vision going within leaders? Why do you think we see drop off sometimes when it comes to kids ministry or any type of ministry?
Yeah, I think one of the, I would say I'll give you three things because I think, to be honest, it's hard to just narrow it down to one.
Right.
Over all the years, you see so many different things, but oftentimes starts with kind of a loss of purpose. A lot of folks can drop off when they forget or have a hard time remembering the vision, the why. Remembering the why. Why am I doing this? Why am I involved? And why in the world would I want to be a part of this? Even though it's so draining and oftentimes can be when you're working, especially if you have that one problem kid, whatever that might be. We always talk about the problem kid. But then the other piece would be without a metrics of success. So even on a nightly basis. So if you're doing a club on a weekly basis, midweek or not, you're looking at even just volunteers in general. What's that metrics of success for that day? So that point of contact, what's that piece that you're looking, your goal for that particular time frame that you're discipling, and how can you see some type of success in that time? And then really, I think the other thing that sometimes we forget can be on ourselves. So me as a Awana missionary, or even as I've been a director of Journey Club for a while, it's the lack of leadership engagement. And so I say that I put that on myself as a leadership in a leadership position. So if I were to be the director of my Journey Club, those volunteers that are working with me and in the ladder, if you will, under me, how am I involving myself with them? How am I engaging with them on a daily basis, and seeing how I can impact them? Because without that, then we oftentimes can lose people to this feeling of really lack of being engaged. And so I think those are three of the biggest pieces that kind of come from that.
You mentioned a lot of really, really good things there. The why, I'm big on that. I've heard that vision, it's stories with purpose.
Mhm.
And, you can have those stories of that crazy kid that's getting on your nerves or a night that goes terribly wrong. But to give those stories purpose, I love sharing my testimony because Awana is tied to my testimony because I was a wild hyper kid when I was little, just always had energy. And to look at me on the surface, you think he's not getting it, he's not learning. But now look where I'm at, and so it having those stories and saying there is a purpose to this, and pointing to those kids who you've seen God working, or even looking at yourself saying, I remember when I was a kid and I was all over the map, but God worked through leaders to change my heart, and
Yeah.
so
Oh yeah.
yeah, having those stories point to that purpose, consistently reminding your leaders of the why so they don't get bogged down in the trenches of the crazy what's going on
Yeah.
in the ministry. And I love what you said too about like the leader engagement, because I think what can happen is that we get so used to so and so's doing their responsibility. We're going through the motions. We're doing the tasks that you forget to realize, hey, these are people too that are living normal lives. Well, I guess not so normal right now. And who knows? Maybe they had a death in the family, or maybe they're having some hard times at work, and those things can weigh down. And if we're not engaged with our leaders, there's a lot of those things that we can have slip through the cracks. So yeah, our purpose, leader engagement, and I like what you said, checking up on them consistently, whether it's through text or emails or,
Mhm.
showing that this is a family working together to reach
Yeah,
kids.
because it can be really easy for us as, in any leadership role, especially if we find folks who seem like they're just so gifted in that area and ready and willing to just be, they're all gung ho and they do a fantastic job and all that kind of thing. It's easy for us to just kind of let them be because it's, you think about the phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Yeah.
And where if the one leader is doing such a fantastic job, I will just let them do their thing. And that's great and all. But at what point are they going to need some more encouragement? There's going to be a point, and there's always going to be that. Whether they, in your opinion, if you feel like they may be even more mature than you spiritually or even skill wise, what am I doing as the leadership to be able to make sure that they are engaged in a way that I care about them and they know that I value them? Because without being valued, that's one of the biggest things that you can lose someone from, is just the lack of being valued. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we look at this idea of, leaders can easily have things come up that lead to them wanting to step back, or maybe they don't feel valued or appreciated, or maybe they lose sense of their purpose, they step back. So what are some practical things that leaders or Awana directors can do to keep those at the forefront so they do retain those leaders, so that they do keep that purpose alive, so that they keep that engagement going? What are some things that leaders and churches could be doing right now in retaining leaders?
I really believe that if you go back to those 3 points, and just kind of focus a little bit on that. So purpose, why, remembering the why. So as a leader and as a ministry director, a Awana ministry director, missionary, whomever you are in that leadership role, how can you be paying attention to what that those leaders are doing? Can you encourage them and say, man, I loved how you interacted with so and so in that situation, whether it was a difficult situation or it was a time that you were just so engrossed in the story of that kid that you could hear them. And me as a leader, like, man, I love that you were doing that, because that is what helps you to become, to be that disciple maker, to actually speak life into that kid and all of that. And so that's, I think, a huge piece there for, making sure to help remember the why. It's me as a leader saying, I love how you do this. I love how you interact this way. I love what you're doing there. Those points of encouragement, as simple as they might be, little tiny points, man, they speak huge volumes in the long run.
And
Um,
something you said there I love. It's encouragement, but it's pinpoint encouragement. It's encouragement toward the why. I
yeah,
love how you do this because that's what cultivates belonging. Or I love how you taught this because that's really the building blocks of believing. Or,
yeah,
man, I love the application you gave this kid to his question, because that's how he's going to become like Jesus in that moment.
yeah.
So, yeah, encouraging toward our why. That's awesome,
hmm
man. I really like that little unique nuance to it there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you jump off of that, you really go, okay, so for me to speak life in that, what are ways to help my leaders have that kind of a purpose, right? And so give them, maybe it's as simple as having a small 3x5 card or a little tiny business card size that you have 2 little goals that you give your leaders each night. Could be the same goal all year long, such as, something like, hey, maybe my goal as a leader tonight would be to listen to the story of one of my kids and be able to pray for one. And so if you have those 2 pieces and then you walk away that night saying, man, I got to pray for, Jesse, and I got to listen to, Amy's story a little bit of, some tough thing that she was going through this week, or something she was super excited about. And I got to pray, be excited with her, those kind of things where you have those opportunities where you have little goals for that night that kind of help you to, again, remember the why. I think when it all comes down to it, when you can remember the why, that's where we're able to be. And so um, keeping those goals, having small little metrics for success, right? What was a success for tonight? And remembering the positive portions of the night versus the negative, which we are so engrossed with just in the world today. And
Right.
so I think that's a big piece there.
Yeah, one thing you're saying is language is key. And I thought of it in that way because in the Awana directors manuals that Awana came out with a couple of years ago, they have little sections on retention. And in
hmm
one section they talk about how our language is really key in retaining leaders. And
Yeah,
exactly what you said there, they talked about how our culture is really prone to look at the negative. And so if you're only
easy.
speaking negative, like, oh man, this kid kept things all over the place, or I didn't teach my lesson well, or nothing went right, eventually those negative blocks build on your shoulders to the point where it's like, I don't want to do this anymore, and you
Yeah,
drop it.
you're done. Yeah.
And so I'll link to these in the show notes. I actually was skimming through them before we got on our conversation, but I believe it's in book 2 and 3 where it talks about retention. And it's awesome, man. Just kind of building on some of the things you're saying there, but it made me think of that language piece of, hey, yeah, there's going to be things that we can talk about we need to improve, but also what are things we can highlight and say, hey, here's how the
Mhm.
Spirit was working tonight. Yes, the night was crazy, but Johnny, who never says his verses, said his verse tonight. Or, looking,
Retried.
yeah, or he
You
tried,
know?
looking for those things to highlight. So yeah, language is huge. Things we look for is huge, and that takes practice to retrain that. And so,
Yes.
but I
Yeah.
totally agree what you're saying there with the language. And so, yeah, keeping that purpose, having that metrics of success. I like the idea of having goals in front of you and having, those meetings. I think some things that are helpful for
Yeah.
leadership retention is just consistent feedback meetings to say,
Yep.
hey, how are things looking? How are we doing toward what we're reaching for? Maybe a goal of a church is they really want to up their outreach. How many
Hmm.
unsaved kids are we reaching? We got our church kids, or maybe their goal is to up Bible retention, how much memory verses they're going through. So, whatever the big goal is for your church, consistently having feedback meetings and walking through it, seeing what's working, what's not. And that goes a long way because, like you said, that gives leaders purpose. How am
Exactly.
I using the things I'm doing, my tasks, my responsibilities to help us reach our goal? And that makes every person's part, no matter how small they may think it is, it makes it huge. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's good stuff, man.
Yeah. And being able to hear, like you're saying, really being able to hear of your atmosphere that you have going on right there is
Yeah.
you need to be able to listen without being able to be taught or teachable. Then we have, as leaders, we have lost quite a bit of our ability to be the kind of leaders that Christ has called us to be. I think that's really one of the biggest pieces there. And it's huge.
Yeah. And then your third piece, you were talking about leadership engagement. And there's some, I mean, we could do a whole episode on that, really on just how to engage with your leaders. But as you think about leadership engagement, what's some just quick tidbits you could give on that as we're practically looking at retaining leaders through engaging them?
Yeah. Yeah, we've already touched on a few of those pieces of just saying, hey, this is great what you're doing tonight, things like that, right? But when you think about the long run, the long haul, the
Yeah.
time frame that you guys are serving together, what are things that you can do to just simple little thank yous? I have folks all the time, our ministry director at our church, that I even get to serve under. They random thank you note or a random a little gift card here or there, and some of these things are going to cost a little bit more maybe than you're normal or you're going to expect. You may not be able to do that, but what are ways in which to whether it's even just at the major holidays, right, where your leaders are even engaging in a way of giving to their kids, giving
Mhm.
gifts to their kids, right, in different portions. What are you doing to do the same thing to your leaders? It could be coming from the ministry budget piece of it. I know sometimes I've known leaders to take part of their tithe and kind of direct it towards that. They're part of their giving for the purpose of investing into the folks who are also continuing to engage in the kingdom of God. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, those are good portions of the engaged leader part of it. Is how are you able to do that? I think those are big pieces.
When we talk about why is it sometimes hard to keep leaders, I think it's very helpful for church leaders to step back and say, do we have it in our budget? Like have an appreciation budget. Seriously, because we'll
Yes.
we'll blow money on like outreach things, on curriculum, but do we have a set aside budget to say, hey, we need to thank these leaders who give of their time and their effort to really go after these kids, whether
Yeah.
that's gifts, whether that's an outing with leaders where we all go out and eat and just celebrate with one another,
Yeah.
whether that's the cards, that's a cheaper option, but it goes a long way. But I really think um, that appreciation that shows leaders that they are valued and that what they do is noticed and it matters. And so, yeah, constant encouragement, constant giving and gifts, and
And
yeah,
I want to kind of share a quick story too on in that, just to say, hey, it's not just something that I'm saying that I feel like it needs to happen. It's something I've seen. I've
mm,
talked with multiple churches over the last few years, and leaders who have said, "This is what we do. We watched our leaders start to give to their kiddos, right? and they would do different things just out of the ordinary for their kids. And they go, well, we need to do the same thing. So they started doing that. And then on the flip side, those leaders who were getting those gifts from them as the church leadership and things like that, because they took that, exactly what you did, and they actually kind of set up a giving portion that they set up for that. Now their leaders are investing even more. They're taking more time, and they're able to do more discipleship. They're able to invest stronger into these lives of these kids. They're so much more invested, and able to encourage these kids, because in one church in particular, they're in a very poor area, and so they're dealing with kids that oftentimes come to Awana without food for dinner, or even having had food for lunch. And you're going, okay, so what are we doing to make sure we're doing that? And so it started with the leaders who wanted to set up some opportunity to do a dinner before Awana, and then the church jumped on and did the same thing. And then now it's kind of like a circular motion. Once the leadership up high, once we're able to invest into those next to us, who are then investing in the kids, it's like a snowball effect. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Having that servant mentality. And you actually reminded me of a story because you were talking about food. Was one church I've seen, the way they appreciate their leaders is they have an appreciation dinner either at the end or the beginning of the Awana year, where and they do it up big, man. They have really good food that comes to the church, and they'll have moments where they recognize leaders, like they'll give them gifts, uh,
Nice.
different things like maybe years of service, maybe just things they noticed that year, above and beyond awards. It was just a way to really show the leaders, hey, what you do is amazing, and we don't take it for granted, and we're not pulling any punches to show you how much we mean this. So yeah, anything like that, whether
Yeah.
it's dinners, whether it's gifts, whatever it is, to show that appreciation. And one last thing I'd say too is beyond the encouragement is to be open and to welcome feedback from your volunteers. Because maybe
Absolutely.
sometimes volunteers have, maybe they're not jiving with something that's going on, or they have some questions or concerns, and maybe they don't feel comfortable sharing those. A transparent, open environment is huge for retaining leaders. That's just something you see in the business world, is when you're open to that. And that definitely can apply to here too. And so, whether that's having surveys at the end of the year saying, hey, what went well? What didn't?
Hmm.
Did we serve you well? Did you feel equipped? Did you feel empowered? Why or why not? And so, um, welcoming feedback really
Yep.
can help in retaining leaders along with those encouraging words. But
And yeah, and on top of that, not just the feedback, but being willing and ready to have those conversations, because oftentimes there could be points where you need to have a conversation so that you're able to be on the same page and see, what's the purpose behind everything that we do, or not, and what things can we change, and all that kind of thing. So feedback is great, but how can we make sure that we're having that conversation at the end of the day?
right. That way they feel heard, and then you take that next step and say, "Hey, we heard what you said. Let's work on improving it because you matter to
Yep.
us." So
Hmm.
awesome,
Hmm.
man. Well, hey, before we head out, I do a lot of these conversations so far with Awana missionaries, and I wanted to ask, what role can an Awana missionary play in helping churches retain leaders? Because there's missionaries all over the country, well, all over the world, and local missionaries in different areas, whether it's here in Tennessee or in Washington. We've
Yeah.
got missionaries ready to serve churches. So, what role can local Awana missionaries play in retaining leaders?
Yeah. As Awana missionaries, our role really, I mean, from the get-go, our role is to be here for you. So we're available. We're ready to be available, which means everything from setting up meetings together with you, setting up trainings to be able to help encourage you or challenge your leaders to higher level of spiritual service, things like that. The other thing is we know a lot of the ins and outs of Awana. Most of us have been around for nigh on 20 years in some capacity of Awana, whether we've known it since that for 20 years or we've served in for at least 20 years. That's things like that where we know it, and so we want to be able to help make sure that Awana works for your church and your community.
Yeah.
And those are big things, and again, we are here for you. um, that's really the take it down to this the bare minimum. I'm here to help you. So you call me up, I'm going to call you back. You want to set up a meeting, we'll figure it out. You want to do some type of training, we're going to make sure it happens well, and that we're able to make sure that that why is really the behind everything, making sure that we know, so that we can pursue the belong, believe, become, so that every child everywhere can come to know, love, and serve the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And I like how you said we're here for you, because I remember when I first was support raising for Awana, people were like, "So are you a salesman for Awana? Like, well, what does
Right.
it mean?" And it's like, no, literally, my job is to serve the church.
Yeah.
We serve the local church to reach and disciple kids through Awana. And so, yeah, I love that. And there's so many avenues that a missionary can help, like you said, with equipping, with training, but also just being a soundboard. Just to
Absolutely.
hear like, hey, we're here to hear frustrations and to talk those through with you. We've felt them ourselves, and so just to know that you're not
Yeah.
alone, and that's why one of my big heartbeats for here in Tennessee is this word connection. To connect with leaders, to show them, hey, I guarantee the frustrations and tensions you're feeling, you're not the only one. There's other leaders who can talk about that with you, and so
So
yeah,
true.
so and again, the Awana Missionary, not only do we connect with leaders, but we can connect them with other leaders who might be in the same position, maybe same point in
Hmm.
their church when it comes to the Awana ministry. So, yeah, well, Joel, this
Yeah.
was a lot of good stuff. We could keep going, but we may have to have you come back on for some more
Okay.
insight. But this was great, man.
Yeah.
Leaders and volunteers, they're the bread and butter of everything. They're
Yeah.
what make Awana matter. Because, you can have the greatest curriculum, you can have all the bells and whistles, but if you don't have
Yeah.
leaders that are engaged or care about it, it doesn't matter.
That's right.
Leaders make the difference. So we not only want to recruit leaders, but we want to keep them and retain them and
Mhm.
love them and serve them. Not
Yeah.
just
And
what can
like,
I get out of leaders, but what can I do for them?
right. And like you say, at the end of the day, you could recruit, as many leaders as you, I mean, that your church will hold. But unless you're able to retain them and care for them, then what good does it really do if they don't really have, if they're not being filled and encouraged by someone like me in a leadership position, then what good does it actually do? If we aren't able to care for those who are with us. So I would say, before you go anywhere else from here, I just want to spout this out and saying, if you are low on leaders right now, if you feel like you're gonna be struggling this coming year or whatever it might be, um, let's focus mainly on who you have. How can you make sure you're caring for them? And the end of the day, you'll get the chance down the road to be able to talk with somebody and say, hey, would you join us in serving here or whatever? But right now, man, if we could focus on the people that we have, that would be huge.
Yeah. And just as a side note, one of the greatest ways to recruit new leaders is when they see how happy the current leaders are. If they talk to a current leader and they're
Yep.
burned out and they don't care about it anymore, then there's no way you're going to recruit new people. So,
No,
uh,
no.
so retaining leaders, there's so many benefits and there's so much beauty to it. But well, Joel, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, we'll have to have you come again. And man,
Yeah,
just so excited for your new family.
I know, right?
Excited for you guys. And I know that it's a blessing. I'm sure you're tired with all those kiddos in the house. But
It's
thank
fun.
you again so much for coming on, bringing this
Yeah.
insight. And we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, man, I'm grateful to be here, and really, I do hope this helps so many people. Just to be honest, I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, take care, man.
Thanks, Hunter.
Thank you for listening to our episode today. If you've got any questions or comments or suggestions from what you've heard, you can send those to hunterw@awana.org, or you can reach us at www.awanatn.com. Also, if you like to see more content like this, whether it's videos, podcasts, or blogs, you can donate to our ministry. Our ministry thrives off the generous support of other people. And so if you'd like to donate and keep this content going, you can do that at www.awanatn.com/donate. We'll also have that link in the show notes for you. But either way, we're so thankful you were watching, you were listening, and we can't wait to come back on again and share more about how we can thrive in serving our churches to reach kids with the gospel. Take care.